Hello, and a very warm welcome to our lovely audience joining us from various different time zones across different geographies here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I'm your host, Nalin Chandna, and I welcome you all to the 63rd episode of TLR Shows. TLR Shows is a flagship series of live stream shows brought to you by TLR Now. TLR Now is a niche, one stop learning and development, coaching, training, and mentoring organization catering to corporates, educational institutions, and not for profits. TLR Now, headquartered in Pune, India, has presence across the subcontinent, Middle East, and the United States of America. On TLR shows, we have had guests from various different backgrounds. In the last 10 months that we have been organizing these shows now, we have had entrepreneurs, coaches, trainers, speakers, relationship experts, people from the art and culture streams, theater, musicians, media houses, business houses, educationists, lawyers, doctors, etc. TLR Shows is one place where you meet amazing people who share their expertise to transform lives and keep upgrading lives to ensure a brighter future for all. Today, we have a very special guest on our show, Claudia Massei. Claudia is the CEO for Siemens Oman, an executive manager committed to enabling the digital transformation in Oman and to contributing to its economic development while building up skilled local workforce in the Sultanate. As Siemens Oman CEO, Claudia drives business in key growth areas, including power distribution, smart grid, smart buildings, control and automation, and digital solutions for manufacturing. In fact, water management and oil and gas as well. She assumed her role after working with Siemens in Germany, Denmark, and China for various business fields, including wind power and rail automation. Originally, Claudia is from Brazil. She commenced her career in strategy consulting, undertaking assignments in France, Morocco, South Africa, and the United States, besides her home country, Brazil. She subsequently co-founded a SaaS, software as a service edtech startup in Brazil, Educo, which she ran for a couple of years before joining Siemens. Claudia developed her passion for education during her college days when she used to be a part-time teacher preparing students for university entrance exams in Brazil. In her free time, Claudia enjoys to dance, travel, and learn about different cultures, as well as to mentor young entrepreneurs. She is a member of the WEF Global Future Council on Energy Technology, as well as the WEF Closing Future Skills Gaps Taskforce in Oman. She also sits on the Global Advisory Board of Steering for Greatness Foundation, a Nigerian not-for-profit organization, and is the co-chair of the Industrial Advisory Board of the College of Engineering of Sultan Qaboos University in Oman. In 2020, she was nominated by Forbes Middle East as one of the most powerful businesswomen in the region. Claudia holds an aeronautical engineering degree from Instituto Tecnológico de Aeronáutica, an MBA from the Wharton School, and an MA in International Studies from the Lauder Institute, University of Pennsylvania. What an amazing profile, Claudia. A very warm welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Nalin. It's my great pleasure to be here, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone watching us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claudia, for taking time out for us today, this afternoon. Despite your hectic travel schedule, you just returned from Brazil yesterday after a long journey. Thank you so much. So, Claudia, I know intrapreneurship is a subject very close to your heart, and that's the reason that we have this topic here today. And who other than yourself could be the guest today? So I'm really looking forward to this conversation this afternoon. So there is a lot of curiosity amongst our audience as well to understand what is the difference between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship.
Sure. So the first thing is intrapreneurship. It's simply a person who, like, out of their desire, their ideas, and their self-motivation, they start a company, right? So this is an entrepreneur. And then intrapreneur basically comes from the idea that you can be an entrepreneur yourself, but inside a bigger corporation. So what you need to be able to do this is a mix of creativity, of a sense for innovation, and a lot of proactivity to generate ideas and to be able to implement them.
Right.
And this, of course, can relate to improving internal processes in a, like, as you know, lots of big corporations, they're very heavy on processes, and there's a lot of room for improvement many times, as well as it can also mean like developing new services or new products or new systems for the market as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So entrepreneur may sound like a new concept or a buzzword, but it has actually been around for a while. So how did the term entrepreneur come about?
Yeah, so it is exactly from the mix of entrepreneur that comes from French roots and even Greek roots before French roots of taking a task of an entrepreneur, and mixed with the intra, which is the concept of within. So it basically means taking a task, but within a bigger organization.
Right, right, right. I think it actually means that the dreamers who actually do. So dreamers may be either in their own business or in the corporate lifestyle, but they really want to bring change into the organization by doing things in an innovative way.
Exactly, and it's about like starting with an idea, but then actually bringing the change really means putting this idea to work, seeing what needs to be adapted and changed, and then implement those changes. And I think that's exactly where the key is, because there is no way, like anytime if you're starting a company or if you're starting an initiative within the company you work for, there is no way that you're going to have the perfect idea with all details from scratch. Like, you have to start from a vision. You're not going to be ready when you have this vision, and you just have to start something, and then you adjust as you go. And the key to success in this setup, it's really how fast you adjust and how well you adjust. So you have also to be very open to feedback, to criticism, but taking all of those as in a positive way, so that you tweak whatever idea you had in order to make it right for success.
Right, right. So if I understand correctly, it's like an employee who is given financial support and autonomy to create new products, services, and systems for the benefit of the company. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit more to it. I think there is also a culture, and if you like, I'm happy to elaborate on that.
Yeah. In fact, I was reading somewhere, and Richard Branson, he says that the title of entrepreneur hasn't really gotten the amount of attention it deserves, because this is a much larger concept than entrepreneurs. So entrepreneur is a much larger concept. Okay. So what is your take on creating a culture of entrepreneurship in an organization, and how to encourage entrepreneurship?
Sure. Now, so as I mentioned, I think what you need are people that have ideas, but then you also need the people. Maybe it's not even the same person. So it takes a lot of connection sometimes for you to have a strong entrepreneurship culture. You need the people who have the ideas. You need the people who are willing to simply start doing something on that direction. And that may even be people who are not necessarily fully aligned with all the policies and all the rules, the internal rules of the company. Then you need the people who know these policies and these rules much better to go start adjusting the people who are doing something, implementing the idea, so that they can work together in order to make something that is disruptive, but not extremely disruptive that makes it chaotic. And finally, you also need the people who are going to be out there gathering adoption. So let's say you have someone who's simply broadcasting these new ideas within the corporation, and getting the people who were going to support it to adopt and to take this forward. Because as much as you can have an idea that is really well tweaked and it's really, let's say shaped in order to adjust to a corporation, to an organization, you can also maybe have this idea dying very soon if you don't have a mass adoption and people really pushing it forward and taking it with them. So it's really important, like the last stage, to have the adoption of the others, and you need people who are focused on really doing only that. So you need all these agents working together. And I would say in terms of corporate culture, what you need to have is really, first of all, the chance for people to have free time. So it's just like time for them to have such ideas. And even for the people who are going to start doing something about it, they also need the extra time to be able to dedicate to this side project. So you see some companies, especially in Silicon Valley, you have sometimes companies that really let people allocate their work time into such initiatives. And then you also need, of course, a culture of rewarding. And it may even imply rewarding failure, because and you see lots of entrepreneurs in the US saying what it matters is not necessarily to always succeed, but it's actually to fail and to learn from the mistakes. So you really have to instigate that there should be no fear of failure, and what people really need to have is simply learning from the mistakes that they make. And this type of culture, sometimes it's really difficult, because many times you have organizations that talk a lot about it. I think most big corporations nowadays talk about it. But if you start talking to the employees in these companies, they may say, this is just something that they talk, but they don't walk the talk. So it's a matter of like re-putting in rewards and portraying people who really have these characteristics, so that they can inspire other employees to really not be afraid of failing.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point that you've, two things that you really nicely touched upon. One is, I think it's being about transparent and trusting your employees with important company information, including them in company-wide decisions, so that they feel more involved in day-to-day business processes, regardless of their individual roles. Yeah, and getting staff's feedback on the information you distribute as well can help, really. And the other thing that I loved was what you said on rewarding the proactive behavior. I think leaders and managers shouldn't control every detail of what their employees do. Instead, they should be more hands-off and reward individuals who take charge and find ways to improve sales efficiency or the product on their own. Because if you are just monitoring them on the result, so definitely the creativity will just disappear. So that's a wonderful thing you touched upon on proactive behavior, rewarding proactive behavior.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for all of us, and I think the base for you to start as a manager or a leader is really to put a lot of emphasis and a lot of energy in communicating greater goals and a greater vision of what you want to achieve, and ensuring that everyone has the same understanding. Because even if you do this one way of communicating, which I think most managers and leaders end up doing anyway, the problem is really that this message reaches each employee in a different way. So I think where a lot of time and energy should be put, and it's like a textbook type of thing, because I'm not saying everyone can do it quite easily, but
Correct.
Ideally we should really put a lot of time into exchanging with employees to ensure that they really understood what is the general idea. And this, I mean, like really having deep conversations, because I think if you manage to align everyone in the same direction, then, and of course you have to have people who are very self-critical, because one thing that you realize as well, even in companies with the culture of entrepreneurship, is that people may have an idea, and because they had the idea, they're always going to love this, and they're going to think it's the best thing ever. And funnily enough, I mean, maybe you say like that's a little bit of the point of being stubborn, but it's also the human nature that if it's something that you are creating, you tend to be very biased towards it, and you may even forget what was that big goal, that big vision that was shared by your leadership. So it's a matter of like really making sure that people remain vigilant and that they really keep testing, even if an idea comes from them, that they have the capability of take a step back, look at the idea from a little bit of a further lenses, and revisit the vision and the goals that were shared with them to really see if there is a match. And if there is no match, and if you're like working in a very big corporation, maybe there is a match for this idea that you had somewhere else. So I think it's also a role of the manager to take the time to interact with that employee and to think about if the idea is a valid one, but it's not really implementable in this part of the organization where you are working with him, if you can take this idea somewhere else. And I think some companies even have programs that, for example, at Siemens, what we have something called the 3I. And what you do is basically the portal where any employee can log in and they can write whatever idea they have. They have, of course, to elaborate on what are the benefits that it's going to bring to the corporation. And they can even select where they think this idea could be implemented, like in which department, in which country. And this way, if the idea ends up being implemented, or even if it doesn't get implemented for technical reasons, but it was a really good idea, the employee gets a small financial reward. So it's a way to keep ideas coming and people thinking about how to do that best.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome concept. That's reward is a good way to encourage people to come out with new ideas. But I think it's also important that, like in a small startup, similarly in a corporate lifestyle or a corporate function, it is important that we keep on fixing problems as they arise, so that the employees get a lot of confidence in the way the organization is moving. Because when an issue occurs in a startup, entrepreneurs must take responsibility and address the problem right away. If they don't, it could escalate and cause the business to fail. And the idea might be portrayed as the idea was not right. But it might be a simple issue that the implementation went wrong. Or small, we are bound to have problems when we kind of start implementing new ideas. But those problems, if we fix them as they arise, we need to instill the sense of urgency in our employees and teach them to fix all the problems, large or small. I think that's also quite helpful to encourage the spirit of intrapreneurship in an organization, I believe.
Yeah, and of course, like being not reacting so critically to feedback. So the point is, it's really like to have this behavior of really seeking feedback and taking any type of feedback in a constructive manner.
Yeah. I think it's also about encouraging healthy competition amongst the organization. One way is the one you mentioned, that we reward the employees as the new ideas come in. But I think, like entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial employees should have a healthy sense of competition with one another to do the best job they can and get the results. But as a leader, it's your job to make sure that it remember that their success is intertwined. Nobody works in isolation as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. We have an audience question here. Ankur Vermani. He says, "Hi, Claudia. Within my organization, we have developed a culture to encourage entrepreneurs. The most difficult part is to judge which is better idea and how will it be adopted. Any golden rule for adoption?"
So I think there are two ways of looking into that. One of them is, of course, the impact of the idea. And the other one is how easily it can be implemented. So if you have a pool of ideas, and I think that's the best way to look at it, is to always, maybe like from time to time, you gather all the ideas that were given. And I mean, I'm a former consultant, so I'm going to talk about matrices here. So you get on a matrix and you plot like the easiness of implementation and the impact that you can have. And hopefully you get a couple of them that are on the top end, which means it has a big impact and it's easy to implement. So those should definitely be the low-hanging fruits. The other way to do it is like the example I gave from Siemens, in which we have this portal and people submit there, and what they do is simply they always ask you to submit the financial impact of the idea. And even if you're talking about something a little bit like more soft, you can always try to look at what are, let's say, if you put on a hotline, how many more customer sales, like how much more revenue you think you can improve your business by. Maybe it's like 1% of revenue, but you can try to quantify it so that you try to build a business case for it. And you always look if the return that you're expecting, assuming that you have a good analysis and a good probability of success, the return that you're expecting overcomes the cost, then you should also go for it, provided that you have the human resources. So I think you have those two approaches. The first one, it's more interesting for corporations where you don't have so much human capital available to implement ideas. So you really have to pick like the best ones. And I think for me, the best ones really mean like seeing the higher impact with the lowest investment or lowest cost. And the other one in which you analyze every single idea as long as they have a positive outcome is for the corporations where you have more human capital available for implementation. If that makes sense.
True. Yeah, I hope Ankur got his answer. We've got another member from the audience, Ehsan Abale. Says inspirational, good job. Thank you, Ehsan. Thank you for being here today with us. So Claudia, as a former entrepreneur, what are some of the characteristics you have developed yourself and that you were able to bring in to a multinational corporation to help you in your career?
Yeah, so I think it's sometimes like people ask me, like in my like career path, what happened is that out of my MBA, I got the Siemens offer, and I asked Siemens to wait for me for one more year because I wanted to go to Brazil and get my company running and then move. And many people kind of like asked me how if I thought that was worth doing, because of course I ended up having a good career at Siemens as well. And I really have to say, I don't think I would have had the impact at Siemens if I would not have had my entrepreneurship experience. And I say this because coming out of consulting, where I had a lot of resources and I had access to reports, insights, like people helping making slides, and a lot of support around. When you come into a bigger corporation, you have a lot of people working, but you don't have that much pampering around you. So I think like being an entrepreneur taught me first and foremost the idea of perseverance and determination. It's the idea that if you think like I think that's the path I have to go, you're gonna find many no's on the way. You're gonna find many closed doors, and you have to make sure that you persist to open them. And there is also a learning curve there, because some ideas are not worth pursuing, but it takes a lot of trial and error for you to learn how much should you really push each type of idea. So which fights you really should pick. And of course, it's something that I keep learning, but I think that was a crash course when you're starting your own company, because pulling an idea from zero when you don't even have a brand name behind you is a big test of perseverance and determination. The second thing is the idea of learning, and how much you should never stop learning. And I think this is important for you to be an intrapreneur as well, like for you to bring new concepts into a bigger organization. But it's also something that really helps even your self-esteem and as a professional, because you don't get this fear of like, oh, maybe I'm not so relevant as a professional anymore. So this idea of like constantly learning, it's something that you really need as an entrepreneur, and it's really absolutely needed when you're trying to bring in new concepts, because you have to study them, you have to understand why they're good for a certain group of people. You have to also to acknowledge what is not so good about them and how you can improve, and so on. And I think the last one is to not be afraid of taking calculated risks or making calculated mistakes, because that is also something, especially if you're trying to get a corporation to adopt a new, like a change in their processes, or a new product that you wanna try to push and to make everyone buy in the organization before you even sell outside. It's there is definitely going to be moments in which you're going to be wrong, or you're going to underestimate how much time it takes, how much effort you need to put in. But you have to start from something. So the main point is you will make mistakes. So of course you have to be in an organization. You have to have support of managers that don't mind you making like calculated input mistakes, but you also have to be okay with that. And I think sometimes, especially for some people who are very creative, very innovative, they may have a very successful track record. And it's about like some people, you have some events in the world where people say, oh yeah, I don't want to do this because I don't want to mark my reputation. I don't want to like put that at risk. But I think that is also something that you have to be comfortable with, and you have to understand that one mistake, it's not necessarily jeopardize a full reputation that you have, but some people, as the let's say, the longer they have been in a career path, the less they want to take risks. And I think that is something that you have to be constantly working on in your own mindset.
Right. Yeah, actually, I think, as they say, that life doesn't come with a user manual. So you have to go and do things on a daily basis to see and figure out things for yourself. And absolutely, fear of failure is something which you need to get over with if you want to succeed as something who's creative enough. Wonderful. So, can you share some examples of entrepreneurship that you have experienced firsthand, or that companies have adopted?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned before, like I have a consulting background, and I think the first time in a career that I have seen first-hand entrepreneurship was when I was at the consulting firm I used to work for was Monitor, and then it was acquired by Deloitte later on. And what we decided within our office in São Paulo was that we wanted to start a recycling, a sustainability effort. So we looked at several pillars where we could do, like one of them was printing labs and making things more digital. The other thing was about recycling all the cans. Like normally when you work in small offices, you normally have like law firms and consulting firms, you have this fridge filled with like cans of sodas. And then we just used to dispose them in the normal garbage. So we started a recycling initiative with that, also recycling paper. And we looked at some other things like of harvesting natural light, adjusting like LEDs, and so a lot of things like this for our office. And of course there was a financial impact, but it was mostly for the environmental impact that we're doing that. Then later, when I transferred to France, I was just there on a 6-month assignment. I decided to try to implement some of those measures we had developed in São Paulo, also in the Paris office. And same thing when I went to South Africa. Although South Africa, the reality was much different, but we tried also to look at what we could do to try to actually start such an effort like this. Of course, the big dream was that maybe we can try to spur a global movement, and then all the offices worldwide could adopt some sort of sustainable measures, which at least while during my time there, it didn't happen, because shortly after South Africa, I left the firm. But that's one of the things. It just came from like a group of employees that decided, like, look, there are so many things just going, and that's like a type of entrepreneurship processes. So there were like things were running the way they were running for so many years, and like the janitors of the office were taking care of all the garbage and disposing as they knew better. As they knew best, because they did not know how to do it better. So with our initiative, we decided, no, let's change the processes, and then we just explain to the janitors what they should be doing instead, and we can create an impact with that. So that is one example. The other one is another one from Siemens that I can share. It's we have a competition for ideas. So I mentioned the portal where people can submit ideas, but those are like much more, not necessarily an idea for a brand new type of line of products of Siemens. So what Siemens did is that they created an initiative that runs once a year, in which people are able to submit business ideas. They actually can come up in teams and work on them, like for a couple of months. And then they really organize an event, kind of like a similar thing to Shark Tank, to those who know the US TV show. in which the employees of Siemens who have been working on these ideas, they come on stage and they go pitch to a jury that is formed by top leaders and top managers of Siemens. And those guys are going to probe them with questions and so on, and then they pick the top ideas to really put a little bit more investment on them. Right. And a similar initiative is also, there was a partnership, I'm not sure if it's still on, but there was a partnership with Techstars, which is one of the accelerators very well known in the US. And they had 2 tracks in which same concept, people would come up and they would develop ideas, but those would be really ideas that would not necessarily only be a new product line, it would be a completely new company, maybe a company adjacent to what Siemens does that would have some synergies. But the main idea there would be that this employees pitching, they would be willing to become entrepreneurs, and Siemens would also be willing to give them an unpaid leave of some months to go to the US to participate in the program of Techstars, try to see if they really felt comfortable pushing that idea forward. And then if they would be comfortable, then they would leave Siemens and become entrepreneurs, but after already having gone through a period of developing the ideas among themselves and plus the acceleration program in the US. So that means you start a company with MVP, as you call in the entrepreneurship world, that's the minimum viable product, and with a lot of training from Techstars to be able to pitch to investors and maybe even with some seed investment already. So you're in a much better shape to start than you would be if you'd be starting on your own. So these 2 examples are quite interesting. And if I have time, another one that's not something I experienced firsthand, but Google actually. So if you look at a lot of applications that we use nowadays, so Gmail came out of an entrepreneurship type of activity, and the same thing with Google Maps, and I'm pretty sure many other also did, because at Google they have this idea of allocating some extra time for the employees so that they can work on side projects. So not like 20% of their time. It used to be for every employee, and nowadays they have restricted to just some roles, but like 20% of the time, so 1 day a week, they can simply work on something in parallel. And that's how you can have a company that keeps bringing innovation to the market at a speed and a pace that is pretty much unseen before.
Correct. Yeah, some companies have a 20% concept. Some do like hackathons, maybe 3 days in a year, or every 6 months they'll get together and brainstorm ideas. So different companies have got different approaches, but I think a lot of tech giants have got this 20% thing that you're mentioning. Google, for example, Facebook, for example. Claudia, sometimes I believe entrepreneurship also happens by accident. If we take the example of 3M, the post-it notes, Dr. Spencer Silver, who was the scientist at 3M, he was attempting to create an extremely strong adhesive to use in aerospace technology. Instead, he accidentally created a light adhesive that stuck to surfaces well, but didn't have a nasty residue. So instead of throwing away his idea because it didn't solve the problem of aeronautical engineering, he stuck with it until he found the use for it. And after many years of persistence and spreading the word, it finally clicked with someone else. So, and another 3M scientist, Art Fry, he thought to bring back one of Silver's seminars, and they began to develop a product together, and post-it notes were born. And if you are the vast majority of desk workers, you're probably looking at a pad of them right now. So everybody has been using post-it notes, which actually was a failed accident, but it came out of the result of entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah, I think in general, like everything that we create and every idea that we have always has a use somewhere. The main challenge is really finding where this use is before your energy of persistency ends. So it's a matter of like how long can you keep trying to find use for that and a market for that and a business model for that before you simply give up because you don't have more money or more energy or willingness to try.
Correct. Even the Sony PlayStation, it was developed by a very junior employee in Sony. He spent hours tinkering around with his daughter's Nintendo to make it more powerful and user-friendly. And in the event, he found out that he could make another gaming device which is so successful today. So yeah, I think we have to give that freedom to the employees to be creative, to come up with new ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and also the network to support them, like maybe internal mentors to help improve whatever features they're thinking about, and also people who are really well connected in the organization to find out like maybe the end user for that idea, which is actually that's what's going to keep it alive and not let it die.
Correct. No, and that's true. I mean, there are so many stories that you could go on and on about things having developed by accident. Even since we are on it here, the Facebook the like button that we use on Facebook, it was first prototyped in one of the hackathons of Facebook. And all of us in the computer using world are we pretty evidently know how the invention is, and we so much look for the like and comment sections in our posts. That was
Indeed.
actually developed by accident. Yeah. So Ankur Vermani has got another question. He says, during pandemic situation, some new ideas have impacted entrepreneurs. The most profitable have been leaner organizations. Which new concept touched you the most globally?
In terms of becoming leaner, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's, I mean, the main part is, I think in our case, we have mostly gone very much digital. Like Siemens already had a lot of tools to work in remote setups because we have anyway a global workforce. Like we work in regions sometimes. So I have a number of people who are in the Emirates supporting me in Oman or in Qatar, in Kuwait. And so we exchange a lot of resources this way, and a lot of, we were already very used to collaborating and so on. And so we didn't necessarily become leaner because of the pandemic. I think like becoming leaner was something that Siemens had been pursuing for a while. But one thing that I have to say that I believe, like putting the concept of leaner in general terms, not necessarily only with Siemens, but the concept of leaner and how it impacts entrepreneurship for me is that you have pretty much, like if you have a linear structure, you normally have a little bit less bureaucracy, and you have an easier way to tapping on several decision makers, right? When you have a very hierarchical company, maybe like the very first person on top is not going to necessarily know what's going on, like in the very bottom of the pyramid. And if you have a linear organization, this flow of information becomes a little bit easier. So that really helps the idea of entrepreneurship, exactly because what we were talking about. If you have an idea, you have to be able to find use for that. You have to be able to show the impact. And while when you have a big hierarchical structure, then you have more people, and maybe one of them, you see the value in it. You also have the problem that the person that really needs to be behind it is probably like a little bit higher on top, and maybe you have someone in the middle of the way who's simply going to kill it. So if you have a linear organization, then the likelihood that you're able to really like sell internally your idea to the people who may be the final decision makers and the final supporters, that increases a little bit because your distance in the organization is a little bit shorter than it would be otherwise. So I think it helps. On the other hand, of course, if you look at the working from home context, we have an issue nowadays, which is that we're in the cases where we're purely working remotely, or much more remotely than we used to be before. Once you have an idea, then of course it may be easier to transport this to other people, but also to have ideas, you need sometimes just like this informal interaction among employees. You need people to be having coffee together. You need people to be like sharing their struggles with the other one, so that someone can come up with an idea. And I think that is where work from home is really impacting us, because it has been a moment in which you end up interacting for very specific reasons in very specific times. And I don't think people have so much more this time to simply sit down together for lunch and talk about the issues they're facing, or try to help colleagues with something. Like everything has been much more reduced to meetings and something that has an agenda and has a constrained topic. And I think this is where, in the long run, we may really feel that there is a little bit less spark in terms of creating new ideas.
Yeah, I think everything just boils down to enhancing efficiency and improving productivity, because we are in a competitive world. So we need to constantly be out for enhancing our efficiency and how we can improve employee productivity, the organization productivity, to bring more value to the organizations we work in.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, I was just thinking we've got a large audience from India in this program today, and India has its own great stories of entrepreneurship. So maybe for the benefit of the audience here, just kind of bring out a few pieces here. Uh, HDFC Bank, Claudia, is one of the most prominent banks in India. They have redefined industry parameters. When the banking system was opened up for private sector, there was a very bad reputation of public sector banks, the government banks, and people used to like wait in queues. If you have to go to the bank, you have to probably spend the entire day to get your bank work done. You have to like spend 3 hours waiting in the queue and then getting the work, all the paper formalities. But organizations like HDFC Bank, which really revolutionized the banking industry, and that was the power of entrepreneurship that we saw in early days in India. After the liberalization began, so the organization really redefined industry parameters, challenged fossilized thought processes and archaic work methods, and now banking is so seamless, in line with the countries across the world. And what that did was that also helped the public sector banks to kind of catch up, and now everybody is trying to provide the best possible services. But I think entrepreneurship, a classic example is there, which has really revolutionized the banking industry in India. Then Infosys, you might have heard of it, the Indian IT company, which have got like a global presence now. Their employee ownership was something which was happily kind of inculcated by encouraging employees to come up with new ideas and look for new ways of doing things. So those are really classic examples. Then an Indian FMCG major, Marico Industries, they are into the edible oil space and few other fast moving consumer goods. They've got a concept of young boards in the organization, which is essentially cross-functional teams that work on business ideas for 12 to 18 months. So they've got like 8 to 12 people devoted into different teams, and those they call as young boards, which will have all the authority to kind of plan around, check on how things will be done, come up with a business plan, and then toss it off to the management. So those have been really good examples in the Indian space as well. A lot of Indian industries have been succeeding with the entrepreneurship thing that is being now inculcated in the employees. And I think that's the way forward. That's the way forward. Yeah. Great.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, Claudia, since everything has its pros and cons, are there any disadvantages? We talked about so many positives about entrepreneurship. Are there any disadvantages to entrepreneurship for an organization?
The way I like to answer this question is to say, I don't necessarily I'm going to tag as a disadvantage, but I think there are organizations that can really integrate an entrepreneurship culture better than others. And I think it goes back to that idea of really walking the talk when it comes to saying, like, we encourage people to fail within a limited risk, of course. And we really reward learning from failures. And so you really have to have like kind of like a safety net that simply means that your colleagues are not going to start judging you or bullying you because you're trying something and you're failing. So this is definitely where if you don't have this organization ready for it, and you try to foster it just by like a marketing slogan from top management, well, you really have the risk that some people really get excited about the idea and they try to start doing it, and then they get frustrated because what is being broadcast is not really what's happening, and it just can kill the motivation, and employees may even leave because they feel that that it's not authentic. So for me, I think it's a matter of if you want to adopt the culture of intrapreneurship, and now I'm like mostly addressing top leaders, if you believe in it, you have to do, before, especially if you're already a consolidated company and not like a small company that is growing, because then it's quite easy to implement a culture and to change culture. But if you're already a solid company, you have to, before you start broadcasting that you want to have intrapreneurship and having a couple of initiatives, you really have to work on ensuring that your workforce is really open to the idea, and this you have to do really in a very micro type of sphere. So it's really about getting every manager to make sure that they have time to talk to their employees and to encourage that. And how you do this is mostly by incenting, like it's all about incentives at the end. So how can you put an incentive scheme to all the managers in your company, in which if they take the time to talk to the employees and to like maybe have some focus groups or some workshops around this topic, they get rewarded themselves as well. And if you do this, then most of your managers are going to follow. There's still going to be some managers that will think this is not worth pursuing, and they will not do, even if you incentivize them to do so. But without putting a real incentive for people to say, like, no, if I believe in this idea, I will definitely allocate time to do it and to make it happen, then you can have everyone aligned in the same goal and everyone knowing that the people are really committed to it. And then you can have ideas flowing much more. And I think if you look in the tech in Silicon Valley space, that's what companies do. Like everyone who gets hired, even in these companies these days, really believes in it. And then it makes it a full like ecosystem that fosters intrapreneurship. And I think that's where a lot of companies sometimes maybe they start with one or two initiatives, but they don't necessarily put the effort in incentivizing that managers take their time, which is probably the most scarce resources that we have these days as employees anyway. So you have to have a bigger reason to take your time to put into it.
Right. Absolutely. So Claudia, do you think that our new normal of working more remotely will foster or linger entrepreneurship in organizations?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I mentioned before. What I think is, as we are working remotely nowadays, and we have sometimes even longer days, people really have to be careful not to be burned out, first of all. And secondly, as I mentioned before, one of the key aspects for great entrepreneurship is really giving people the time to have ideas, and the time to be creative, and the time to look around their environment and think about what they could improve. So I think there are two things with remote working or working from home. The first one is most people reportedly are working longer hours. So that, of course, eats up the time that they would have to be creative or anything like this. Secondly, if you're not at the office, it's difficult for you to look around your environment and have ideas for that specific environment. So you have to be in a virtual reality, let's say. I think even our brains are not that wired to look at things that could be improved a little bit. Maybe you sense a little thing, some things, but it's different from being physically immersed in an environment. So we have to really put an extra effort in our brains to really be thinking about in this virtual reality how you can really improve things. And the last portion, it's about the interaction. Like a lot of, as I mentioned, there are people who have ideas, there are people who implement, and there are people who are going to help get adopters, first adopters, and there are people who are going to necessarily only broadcast results. So you need different people with different characteristics coming together in the name of a bigger goal. And unless you have the coffee time and the water cooler time and the lunch time together, it's very difficult to spark this type of interactions and ideas, I think, in a world where we dial in meetings, we have an agenda, we finish the agenda, and we leave. So in this reality, what I can say, I don't know many examples of big corporations, apart from Silicon Valley ones, that necessarily have a good best practices. But I can share some things that we have been doing at Educo, which is my tech company in Brazil. So since the pandemic started, like everyone's working remotely, as you may be aware, like the situation in Brazil is not that easy. So everyone has been working remotely since March. And then what we do is every day, at the very beginning of the day and the end of it, we take something between 15 and 30 minutes for an all-hands meeting. So all-hands meeting brings everyone together, like with their mug of coffee in the morning and maybe some soda in the afternoon, and everyone can talk about what the objectives for that day is. So because we're doing a type of a B2C type of business, like we basically sell to, a B2B type of business, we basically sell to schools. So everyone has like their targets of how many schools they need to talk to, or if they're like on the type of like a customer service side, they have the issues that they have to take care of. They have to contact customers as well. So we deal a lot with data. So we have like daily targets of how many schools we should reach out to and how many bugs in the system we should solve from the programmer side and so on. So they share what is the goal for the day. Like not necessarily everyone shares every day, but like some people share. This is done in a very spontaneous way. So there is no ritual for this, but there is like this 15-20 minutes in the morning in which people share what they want to accomplish. And then at the end of that day, they come together again for 15 to 30 minutes, and they talk about how the day was. And of course, in this moment, when you're talking about how your day was, maybe you talk about something that went well, maybe you talk about something that really did not go well. And in this moment, of course, people may chip in, they may give ideas, they may share experiences, or even as you're sharing your objective for the day in the morning, people may like think about, maybe I have a comment here. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to give their comments in this 15-30 minutes, but maybe after this first meeting starts, you can pick up the phone and call your colleague and say, oh, if you're trying to do this today, let me give you an advice, right? So really specifically open moments in which people can exchange. They can talk about simply what they want to accomplish on that day and how they have accomplished and how things went. And if you look at it, like it's 1 hour per day, so it's basically 12.5% of your time that goes into these meetings for the whole company every single day. But nevertheless, this really keeps the team spirit together. And the other thing that we have also implemented, that's something we implement twice a week. It's a meeting that we call STEP. And it's because of we're all engineers, so there is something in mathematics called the STEP function. So it's basically like if you're here and then you come here, so you have like kind of like a you just increase some unit and then you keep going, and comes from the idea of a ladder in which you climb steps. And what is the point here is that they try to bring in some inspirational speaker from maybe a different industry, like or like some professor, like someone who can bring in some interesting ideas so that people can keep the motivation, and also like taking advantage that now so many more people are very keen to just jump on the phone, and a lot of people whose job is speaking, if they don't have to go somewhere to give a talk, it's very easy for them. They can simply like free up 45 minutes of their time, jump on a Zoom call or like we're doing here. And so they have taken advantage of this changing behavior to try to bring in speakers every 2 weeks to motivate the people or to like, get them to think about different industries and different practices and so on. So I think those two are definitely ways to spark creativity and enhance collaboration in the team that I really admire, and I have seen like great results from in the past 10 months that we have been implementing those.
Wonderful. So I think it's about the right culture and encouraging employees to kind of be open, and again the support at the back that the organization supports their ideas and failure is fine. I think it all boils down to that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So as we see, I mean, great ideas and products came as a result of letting your employees think, experiment, and play. And how you do this is different for every company. We talked about the 20% time rule for some organizations, while hackathons are a better idea for others. But what's important is that you embrace the overall goal of engaging employees and choose a system for applying that vision that fits with your company culture.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. I think
like the worst thing that you can try to do is actually to get something that worked well somewhere else and put in your company, and it's definitely not. It's not a copy paste exercise. It's really something that fits in the context that you have, and that even reinforce some aspects of your own culture. So that's why it has to be a standard. Like, it cannot be a standardized approach. It has to be really customized.
Yeah, I think being authentic is so key step. Being authentic is important. That's where innovation is going to come out.
Yeah, and if there is one last message I can give, because I know we're running almost out of time, but one last message I want to give to the audience here, it's if you are an employee, which I imagine most people here probably are, it's I think it all starts with self-awareness. There is no way that, especially in a big corporation, you cannot do everything yourself. You cannot have the idea, implement, learn about the policy and rules, adjust, and then even broadcast to everyone. Because, I mean, the main point is, if your idea is really something valuable, there's definitely going to be at least one more person that you know that is going to say, oh, I like it, let's team up, right? And then you maybe find a third and a fourth. So the first and foremost important part is really self-awareness, because you have to realize if you are the guy who's going to have the idea, or if you're simply not so good at having ideas, you're really good at doing, which is my case, for example, or if you are the guy who really likes to know the procedures and the processes and the rules, and you can actually be the one giving feedback and adjusting so that things don't go chaotically, or if you're simply like a coffee drinker who likes to talk to everyone about the latest inventions from your colleagues. So having that self-awareness and knowing where you play best, because intrapreneurship is always going to be something extra. It's not going to be your core job. So it has to be something that where it even has to give you energy back. So it cannot take your energy from you. It has to be something where you excel so much that when you're performing that, you can get energized by it. So the first step is self-awareness. Know what you do best, know what you really like to do, and then you find the other people, like maybe if you're not good at having ideas, you can talk to people that you think are good at ideas, and then you can show to them that, like, I would like to implement something, but I have no idea what. And then maybe this person can help you have an idea, right? So that is the part of that many times people, they just get lost because they don't worry about knowing themselves, and they're trying to play a role that's not theirs. And it's fine not to be the guy who's going to have the idea, not to be the guy who's going to be knowing about the policies, for example. It's totally fine as long as you can contribute your talent to the organization.
True. And as they say that if you're running alone, you may go faster, but if you're going with somebody else, you may go farther. So that's the whole concept of working together. I absolutely loved the session today, and I really hope that our audience got some wonderful insights as well. I thank Claudia for finding out time for us and being a part of today's episode of TLR Shows and sharing such important insights with us. Thank you, audience, for joining us from various geographies. Keep following us across our social media channels to stay updated with our upcoming shows and with what new is happening at TLR now. Thank you so much. You all have a great weekend. Take care, stay safe, eat well, and be happy. Thank you again, Claudia. I will see you on the other side of the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe and stay healthy.